I never thought I'd be thanking my sister for stealing my groom. But life has a twisted sense of humor. It all started with a wedding invitation. Cream-colored, thick paper. Gold lettering so ornate it looked embossed with arrogance. It arrived on a Tuesday morning like an uninvited ghost from a past I was trying to bury. And there they were. 2 names engraved in metallic flourish. Monica Carter and Henry Jameson. Together with their families. Request the honor of your presence at their wedding. I stood there in my kitchen in Brooklyn, coffee in hand, heart in my throat. I read the names again. I don't know what I felt first. Rage, betrayal, disbelief. Maybe all 3 crashing together like a storm surge. I should have burned it. Tossed it in the sink, lit a match, watched it curl and blacken like the lies that had brought it into existence. Instead, I RSVP'd yes. But not for forgiveness. No, I had something else in mind. See, 6 months ago, I had the kind of life you'd frame in a holiday card. I was 30, a senior attorney at one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms. I lived in a sunlit apartment on the Upper West Side, a block from Central Park. And I was engaged to Henry Jameson, a man I'd loved for 6 years. I used to believe we had something rare. Soulmate stuff. Henry wasn't just a partner. He was woven into the fabric of my everyday life. Morning coffee routines. Sunday market strolls. Stolen kisses in courtroom corridors. We had a plan. A future. Kids, travel, retirement somewhere warm with lemon trees and morning beach walks. All of it vanished with a single text message. It wasn't even meant for me. Just a random Tuesday. Just another routine day. I'd come home early from a deposition, opened Henry's laptop to send an email to our wedding caterer, and there it was, an open message thread. Monica. Last night was magic. I love you. She doesn't know yet, right? I remember staring at the screen. My hands numb. My breath shallow. My baby sister. The same girl who used to braid my hair and share bunk beds with me at summer camp had become the woman stealing my fiancé. I confronted Henry that night. No yelling. No crying. Just questions, like I was building my own case. He confessed. Said it had just happened. 4 months. Said he hadn't known how to tell me. And Monica? She called it fate. I called it betrayal. The fallout was nuclear. My father, God bless him, didn't speak to Monica for weeks. My mother kept saying, "Let love lead, Emily." I stopped attending family dinners. I deleted my wedding Pinterest board. The engagement ring sat in a drawer like a loaded gun. Now, here I was, being asked to celebrate their union. But I had a plan. If they thought I'd show up heartbroken, alone, and defeated, if they thought they could erase me from the narrative, I had one word for them. Watch. I called Rachel the moment my hands stopped shaking. They invited me, I said, voice flat. To the wedding. My sister and Henry. There was a pause, then a sharp inhale on the other end of the line. What kind of psycho sends a wedding invitation to the woman he cheated on? With her sister, no less. I guess a very confident one, I muttered. No, Rachel corrected. A narcissist. By noon, she was at my apartment, armed with wine, overpriced croissants, and a battle plan. Rachel wasn't just my best friend. She was the storm that came in when my world cracked open, always ready with sharp wit and even sharper lipstick. We're not letting them write your ending, she said, tossing her coat over a chair. You're going. But not like this. I raised an eyebrow. Not like what? She gestured toward me. Baggy sweatpants, tear-stained hoodie, and an energy that screams dumped. No. You're going to that wedding glowing so hard the flowers will look dull in comparison. And that's how Operation Blossom was born. Rachel drew up an actual plan. A literal timeline on a whiteboard she bought from Staples that same day. Week 1. Hair. Week 2. Dress plus skin. Week 3. Strength training. Week 4. Confidence rebuild. Think of it as legal prep, she said, uncapping a marker. Only instead of a courtroom, the battleground is a luxury wedding in Newport. And your closing statement? A crimson dress, a killer smile, and an emotionally unavailable +1 so attractive it makes Henry choke on his champagne. I laughed in spite of myself. It was the first time I'd laughed in weeks. I let her cut 4 inches off my hair. We added subtle honey blonde highlights, soft curls framing my face. We booked weekly facials, mani-pedis, and Pilates sessions. I started running again, slowly at first, like dragging the grief behind me mile after mile. Most mornings were still hard. I'd wake up remembering the life I'd lost. The wedding we were supposed to have. The villa in Tuscany we'd planned for our honeymoon. But by noon, Rachel would text. No time to grieve. Time to glam. It wasn't just vanity. It was armor. Then came the dress. We scoured every boutique in Manhattan, but nothing clicked. It wasn't until we found a small showroom in Soho that we saw it. Crimson silk, floor length, with a low back and a side slit that whispered elegance but shouted power. Rachel gasped. Oh, Emily. This is the one. It says, I've healed, I've glowed up, and I'm not here for your approval. I stepped into the changing room and slid it on. For the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't see a victim in the mirror. I saw me, strong, defiant, beautiful. When I emerged, Rachel actually clapped. Now all we need is the date. I frowned. You mean like, a fake boyfriend? No, she said. I mean someone so charming, so effortlessly impressive, that every guest there, including your sister, questions their life choices. That's a tall order. She grinned. Fortunately, I've got options. But fate, as it turns out, had its own idea. It happened the night of the Children's Hospital Gala. One of those sleek black tie affairs where the champagne flows like water and everyone pretends they're not networking. I almost didn't go. My boss had an extra ticket, and I was still debating between hiding under my comforter or pretending to be functional. Rachel pushed me out the door. Tonight could be the night, she said, tossing me a clutch. If not for love, then at least for a story to tell. Turns out, she was right on both counts. The ballroom at the Waldorf was all glass chandeliers and soft jazz. I was halfway through a polite but dull conversation with a real estate developer when I turned to grab a glass of champagne from a passing tray, and collided into someone with the force of a freight train. The entire contents of my glass exploded across a very expensive-looking navy suit. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I gasped, grabbing a cocktail napkin in a panic. I didn't see. It's okay, the man said, holding up a hand and smiling. Honestly, I think this suit needed to loosen up anyway. It was taking itself way too seriously. I looked up, and my breath caught. He was tall, with warm brown eyes and a jawline that looked like it had been hand-chiseled by an Italian sculptor. His smile wasn't flashy, but it was the kind that made you feel like the world had momentarily narrowed to just the two of you. Emily, I said, still flustered. Emily Carter. Josh Walker, he replied, accepting my napkin with a grin. Now that we've shared an awkward collision and ruined formal wear, how about we make it less weird and talk like normal people? We stood near the back of the ballroom, chatting like old friends. I learned he was an architect, just moved back to New York after 5 years in London, where he worked on sustainable city design. I missed bagels, he joked. And sarcasm. Brits are lovely, but they don't weaponize humor quite the same way we do. We talked for nearly an hour, about favorite bookstores, childhood injuries, irrational fears of revolving doors. It was easy. Not flirtatious. Not performative. Just easy. I hadn't had easy in a long time. When the gala ended, he asked, would you be open to continuing this conversation over coffee sometime? Or lunch, if caffeine isn't your thing? My brain, for once, didn't overthink. Yes, I said. That would be nice. The next week, coffee became dinner. Dinner became a lazy Saturday at the Met. By our third meeting, I realized I hadn't mentioned Henry or Monica once. And then I did. We were sitting at a tiny Italian place in the village, finishing tiramisu, when I blurted it out. My sister is marrying my ex-fiancé next month, I said, staring at the table. Josh didn't flinch. That must be Difficult, he said carefully. Are you planning to attend? I nodded, explaining about the RSVP, Rachel, Operation Blossom. He was quiet for a beat, then reached across the table and covered my hand with his. Can I offer a strange proposition? I looked up. Go on. Take me as your date. I blinked. You barely know me. True, he said, smiling slightly. But I like what I've seen so far. Besides, I'm good with awkward family dynamics. I've got years of practice. And I clean up well. I laughed, despite myself. You want to come to a wedding where the bride is my sister and the groom is my ex? That's insane. Maybe, he said. But I'd be going with you. And that makes it worth it. We toasted over espresso and agreed to plan something that looked effortless. Color-coordinated outfits, basic backstory rehearsed. A performance, yes, but one that didn't feel fake. But there was something else. A quiet warmth between us that didn't need rehearsal. That night, as I walked home alone, I caught myself smiling. Not because I had a plan. Not because I was about to shake up a wedding. But because, for the first time in months, I felt seen. The wedding was set at the Marion Bay Estate, a sprawling resort on the coast of Rhode Island where ocean waves crashed against perfectly manicured cliffs and every room smelled faintly of peonies and polished silver. It was the kind of place people booked for proposals, anniversaries, or, if they were my sister Monica, scandalous weddings that demanded a picturesque backdrop to mask the mess beneath. Josh and I arrived fashionably late to Friday's welcome cocktail reception, giving ourselves time to settle into our room and collect our nerves, or at least, mine. You ready? He asked as we stood before the grand ballroom doors. As I'll ever be, I replied, clutching his arm a bit tighter than necessary. The moment we stepped into the room, heads turned. People paused mid-sip, mid-sentence. The woman they didn't expect to show up, and definitely not with that man, had just entered. I could almost feel their eyes scanning me from head to toe. My crimson dress, Josh's tailored navy suit, our synchronized ease. We looked powerful, coordinated, intentional. Mission, shock and awe, initiated. Before we could reach the bar, my mother appeared. Emily, she said, wrapping me in a hug that was a touch too firm, as if squeezing approval out of thin air. You look radiant. Absolutely radiant. Then she turned to Josh, blinking with surprise. And who is this? Josh Walker, he said, charming smile in place. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Carter. Her eyes widened slightly. Well, Emily didn't tell me she was bringing someone. I smiled sweetly. I like to keep some surprises for special occasions. She laughed, awkward but pleased. Of course. Well, welcome. Make yourselves comfortable. As we moved through the room, people I hadn't seen in years floated over. Second cousins, old friends of the family, even one of Henry's college roommates. Josh handled them all effortlessly. He knew when to crack a joke, when to deflect, when to tighten his grip on my waist like a subtle show of support. And then I saw them. Across the room, near the buffet table, Monica stood in a fitted white cocktail dress that hugged her like a second skin. Her blonde hair was swept into a loose updo, carefully undone. She was laughing at something Henry had said, until she spotted us. Her smile froze. Then slowly, she tilted her head like a curious cat watching a bird land too close. Henry turned, saw me, and his whole posture stiffened. There was no warmth in his eyes. Only something I couldn't quite name. Surprise? Regret? Uncertainty? We locked eyes for a second, and I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. I didn't realize how powerful that was until Josh leaned in and whispered, "You've got this." That small gesture steadied me. Monica crossed the room like a woman on a mission, smile widening as she approached. She air-kissed the air near my cheek. "Emily, you came." "Of course I did," I replied, meeting her gaze head-on. "Wouldn't miss it." She turned to Josh. "And this must be your friend." "Boyfriend," Josh said smoothly, extending his hand. "Josh Walker. Lovely to meet you, Monica." "Congratulations." Her smile twitched. "Thank you. That's thoughtful of you." "Where's Henry?" I asked, pretending curiosity. "Getting us drinks," she said, then leaned in, voice low. "You look great, by the way. Red suits you. Bold choice." "Thanks," I said with a slow smile. "I thought so too." She gave a small, brittle laugh and drifted away. A moment later, Henry appeared with 2 glasses of champagne, eyes flickering briefly to me, then back to Monica. He avoided contact. It didn't go unnoticed. Josh and I made our way to the patio where the ocean breeze softened the tension. For the next hour, we navigated conversations, posed for polite photos, and deflected every loaded question with a practiced rhythm that made me feel like a woman in control. That night, in our suite, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the bed. That, I sighed, was emotionally exhausting. Josh poured us both a glass of wine and joined me by the window. "You were incredible," he said, handing me a glass. "Confident. Graceful. Untouchable." "I don't feel untouchable." He looked at me seriously. "That's because you're human. But to them? You were a phoenix. Walking proof that you can burn and rise even more beautiful." I smiled at that. "You're good at this." "I've had practice," he said quietly. "And besides, I'm just here for the view." He looked at me then, not like a role he was playing, not like a man performing a favor, but like someone who saw me. All of me. And in that quiet moment between laughter and recovery, I felt something shift. Tomorrow was the rehearsal dinner. But tonight, I allowed myself to hope. The next evening brought the rehearsal dinner, a more intimate gathering in the estate's private dining hall, with candlelit tables and a curated menu that probably cost more than my first year of law school. I had expected it to feel suffocating, but the low hum of chatter and clinking glasses gave it an oddly serene glow. Josh and I arrived just after the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden streaks across the polished floor-to-ceiling windows. This time, we were greeted not by a sea of stares, but by my father. He hugged me tightly, his voice low. "Pumpkin, I'm proud of you." I blinked, caught off guard. "For what?" "For showing up. For holding your head high. For not setting the place on fire, which, if you had, I might have handed you the match." I laughed softly, but the emotion behind his words clung to me. This wasn't easy for him either. He hadn't spoken to Monica since the engagement was announced. Tonight was the first time they'd be in the same room in months. Our table was strategically placed between the groom's parents, who had always adored me, and a few distant relatives I hadn't seen since college. Josh sat beside me, effortlessly pulling smiles from even the frostiest aunt. Then Monica and Henry entered. They looked like they'd been painted into a magazine spread, she in a champagne-colored satin gown, he in a crisp navy suit, but even from across the room, I could feel the strain. Henry's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Monica kept smoothing her dress, glancing toward me more than necessary. We locked eyes. I offered a polite nod. She looked away. The room quieted as Henry's best man, Tyler, stood for the first toast. "I've known Henry since sophomore year," Tyler began, raising his glass. "He's a guy who always knew what he wanted. Except when it came to brunch menus and apparently, which Carter sister to marry." A smattering of awkward laughter filled the room. My fork paused midair. Tyler quickly added, "Kidding. Kind of." Josh leaned in. "That was a choice." "Oh, that was a deliberate choice," I muttered. Next came the maid of honor, Monica's best friend from college, who delivered a flowery speech full of vague platitudes about destiny and finding love, in the most unexpected places. She never mentioned me by name, but every sentence felt like a knife with a decorative handle. After the toasts, people rose to mingle. Josh excused himself to speak with one of the caterers. Turns out he'd worked with the firm that designed the estate's interior, and I found myself momentarily alone at the table. Until Cameron, Henry's father, took the seat beside me. "Emily," he said, placing a hand over mine. "I just wanted you to know. No matter what happened, you'll always be family to us." I smiled, surprised by the emotion in his voice. "Thank you. That means more than you know." He looked toward Josh, who was now deep in conversation with a staff member. "And your young man seems like quite a find. Confident. Kang. The way he looks at you reminds me of how I used to look at Margaret when we were young. I followed his gaze and saw Josh glance my way with a half-smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Then I saw Henry, standing across the room, watching the exchange. His jaw was tight. His fingers clutched the back of a chair just a little too firmly. I excused myself and stepped out onto the balcony, needing a breath of cool night air. Moments later, a voice followed me. Emily. I turned to see Henry, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. I just wanted to check in, he said. Check in. I echoed. You're marrying my sister tomorrow. He winced. I know. I didn't think you'd come. I crossed my arms. And yet here I am. He hesitated, glancing back at the dining room. Are you really happy? With him? The question hung in the air, thick with implication. I'm happy with myself, I said. And he supports that. That's more than I could say about us, especially near the end. Henry looked like he wanted to say more, maybe even apologize, but the moment passed. Monica appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing when she saw us. There you are, she said, sliding her arm into his. Everything okay out here? Peachy, I replied, brushing past them back inside. Later that night, as Josh and I walked back to our suite, I recounted the whole exchange. He still doesn't get it, I said, exasperated. Still thinks this is about him. Josh nodded thoughtfully. Let him think whatever he wants. You're not here for his understanding. You're here for your closure. I looked up at him. You're right. Of course I am, he said, squeezing my hand. I'm an architect. I build things. Like confidence. Perspective. Very fancy metaphors. I laughed, tension breaking just slightly. The final day, the wedding, was only hours away. And I was ready. The morning of the wedding dawned crystal clear. Blue skies, calm sea breeze, and birdsong so perfect it felt orchestrated. Nature had clearly missed the memo about the emotional landmine awaiting inside the Marion Bay estate. Rachel called me as I sat in front of the mirror, brushing soft waves into my hair. You still breathing? She asked. Barely, I said. But it's happening. I'm going. She paused, then said quietly, I'm proud of you, Em. You're rewriting the ending. By the time Josh arrived at our suite, I was ready. Emotionally, mentally, and aesthetically. He stood in the doorway for a full 5 seconds, just staring. Wow, he said softly. You look like someone ready to crash a wedding? No, he said. Like someone no longer haunted by one. His charcoal suit fit like a dream, the crimson silk of his tie a perfect echo of my dress. Together, we looked like we belonged in a movie. Maybe not a romance, but definitely a revenge drama with incredible wardrobe. The ceremony was held outdoors in a garden overlooking the cliffs. White chairs, overflowing floral arrangements, a string quartet playing carefully curated selections of Coldplay and Bach. Guests stood as Monica made her entrance on my father's arm. She looked stunning, I'll give her that. A lace gown clung to her curves, her expression poised and luminous. But my father's face said something different. Proud, yes, but shaded with melancholy. They reached the altar. The officiant began. Vows were exchanged. Henry stumbled once over his words. Monica didn't. When the minister asked, if anyone objects, the crowd stilled, breath collectively held. Eyes darted, some to me. Josh simply placed his hand gently over mine. I stayed silent. They were pronounced husband and wife. The audience clapped politely. Josh leaned in. You okay? I nodded. More than I thought I would be. But the real drama came later, during the reception. The ballroom glittered with candlelight and laughter. Tables dressed in ivory linens, centerpieces tall enough to block eye contact. I was seated with my parents, a few cousins, and, strategically, Henry's parents. Dinner passed with cautious ease. Wine flowed. The band played jazz standards. Then the best man gave his toast. More polite awkwardness. More strained smiles. And then, Monica stood. I'd like to say something too, she said, microphone in hand, already a little tipsy from the champagne. My stomach tensed. I know, she began, that some of you had opinions about how Henry and I found each other. But love doesn't always follow the rules. She turned, her gaze scanning the room, and landing squarely on me. Sometimes, she continued, raising her glass, the path to true happiness requires clearing out old attachments. He may have been with someone else first, but I'm the one he chose forever. A hush fell. Somewhere, silverware clinked faintly. My mother gasped. My father looked like he might leap from his chair. I sat frozen. Until Josh stood up. Champagne flute in hand. Come. Controlled. Devastating. May I? He asked the room, his voice carrying without effort. All eyes turned. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Josh Walker, Emily's date tonight. And if I may respond to the lovely bride. He smiled politely. Monica blinked. I agree. Love doesn't always follow the rules. But sometimes, breaking those rules leaves a trail of people behind. People like Emily, who despite being betrayed, walked into this room with dignity, strength, and kindness. A murmur ran through the crowd. Josh continued, she didn't come here to cause drama. She came to rise above it. He turned to me then, his voice softening. And from where I stand, I didn't fall in love with someone's leftovers. I met a woman who builds herself back up brick by brick, and I get to witness that strength every single day. If that's not an upgrade, I don't know what is. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, thunderous applause. Even some who hadn't clapped during the vows stood. Monica's expression faltered, lips tight, eyes flashing. Henry looked down at his plate. Josh sat, calm as ever. Too much? He asked under his breath. Perfect, I whispered back. Later, as the band played the first dance, guests swarmed our table with compliments and quiet words of support. Henry didn't look our way again. Monica danced stiffly, smile frozen. But I had already let go. Not with bitterness, but with peace. I escaped to the dressing room during the cake cutting. The applause from the ballroom still echoed faintly through the marble hallways, muffled like a memory. I stood in front of a large gilded mirror, touching up my lipstick with hands that finally stopped shaking. It was over. The vows, the speeches, the long-awaited moment of retribution. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. The door burst open. And there she was. Monica, still in her wedding gown, fists clutching the hem, her chest rising and falling like she had run all the way from the dance floor. What the hell was that? She snapped, letting the door slam behind her. I turned slowly, calm. You're going to have to be more specific. She glared. Your little speech. Or rather, your boyfriend's performance. Turning my wedding into your personal redemption tour. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the part where he defended me after you insulted me? At your reception? That part. I expected you to sit there and take it, she hissed. Like you always do. Like perfect Emily always does. Her voice cracked on the word, perfect. And suddenly I saw it. The years of resentment bottled into one word. Is that what this has been about? I asked, quiet now. You think I've always had it easy? You have, she said, voice rising. Dad's favorite. Mom's pride. The smart one. The successful one. You didn't even have to try. I shook my head, stunned. You think I didn't have to try? Monica, do you know how hard I worked to be seen at all? While you were the golden child with charm, beauty, and attention without lifting a finger. She faltered. I continued, voice steady. You had what I never had. The spotlight. The laughter. The ability to make people fall in love with your presence. I had to build my identity out of discipline and distance. That wasn't easy. Her eyes welled up. But you always looked like you knew who you were. I was always trailing behind. The younger sister. The backup singer. I sighed, genuinely aching now. So you slept with Henry to what? Prove you could take something of mine? It wasn't just about that, she whispered, eyes falling to the floor. At first, it wasn't even planned. He talked about you all the time. Your habits. Your mind. Your routines. And then one night, he looked at me like I was worth something too. I swallowed hard. So you wanted to be chosen. Her voice broke. For once. Silence. I walked over to the counter, picked up a tissue, and handed it to her. She blinked. You're still doing it. Doing what? Looking out for me. Even now. After everything. I gave a half smile. Old habits die hard. We stood there for a moment. Two sisters. Two histories. One shattered bond between us, not yet rebuilt, but maybe, just maybe, no longer broken beyond repair. I'm sorry, Monica said finally, voice barely above a whisper. For hurting you. For not saying it sooner. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said honest. But I hear you. And maybe, someday. She nodded. Slowly. That's fair. She reached the door then paused. Josh loves you. I can tell. Cameron never looked at me like that. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because she was right. As she left, her train brushing past the threshold, I looked at myself once more in the mirror. Same dress. Same reflection. But a different woman looking back. The sun had long set by the time I made it back to the ballroom. The reception was winding down. Guests danced lazily under string lights, a few had disappeared to their rooms, and the cake now looked like the aftermath of a small hurricane of forks and frosting. I scanned the room. Josh stood near the bar, deep in conversation with my father. They were laughing about something. Probably my childhood tendency to alphabetize cereal boxes. My heart lifted at the sight. It wasn't just that they got along. It was the ease. The warmth. As if somehow, this stranger who once wore champagne on his suit now belonged in my life. But before I could walk toward them, Henry appeared. Emily, he said quietly. Can we talk? I hesitated. Then nodded. Just for a minute. We stepped outside onto the same terrace where he had proposed to me at that fundraiser 2 years ago. The irony was poetic. And this time, no fairy lights. Just the moon and a quiet tension between us. I wanted to say, I'm sorry, he began, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when nervous. For how it happened. For hurting you. For not ending things properly before starting something with her. I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. He looked at me then, really looked, like he was trying to find the woman he'd once planned a future with. You were never someone I settled for, he said. I want you to know that. But you left anyway, I said. So whatever I was, it wasn't what you wanted long term. He didn't deny it. I thought I needed something else, he admitted. Spontaneity. Fire. Drama. And maybe I still do. But I miss what we had. I miss you. I took a breath. I don't miss you, I said gently. I miss who I thought you were. But that version of you. He stopped showing up long before you left. He looked down, swallowing hard. I hope it works out with Monica, I added. I really do. He gave a small, sad smile. Thank you. And I hope. You and your guy, he seems solid. He is, I said, and this time it wasn't to prove a point. It was truth. We stood in silence for a beat. Then I turned to leave. I wish you peace, Henry, I said. And with that, I walked back inside. Lighter, calmer, untethered. Josh met me at the edge of the dance floor. Everything okay? He asked. I smiled. Everything's exactly as it should be. He pulled me close as the band began a slow song. We danced. Not to perform, not to prove anything. Just to be. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I was looking forward. 1 month later. Josh and I sat curled on the couch in his downtown apartment, a cozy mix of industrial charm and soft throw blankets that somehow perfectly captured who he was. Structure and softness, intellect and soul. I'd just gotten off a call with my mother. She says Monica and Henry got back from Bora Bora early, I told him. Apparently they fought the entire honeymoon. Something about him texting an ex during the reception. Josh raised an eyebrow. Surprised. Not even a little. He handed me a glass of wine and didn't press further. That was one of the many things I appreciated about him. He never lingered in other people's drama. Only helped me build peace for mine. We'd spent the last month doing ordinary things. Grocery shopping. Late-night ramen. Reading on opposite ends of the same couch. It was simple. Easy. Real. And one evening as we cooked together, me burning garlic bread, him laughing and trying to save it, he turned to me and said, "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from the drawer. Inside was a key, attached to a small silver compass keychain. "To my place," he said. "No pressure to use it. But I wanted you to know, this door is open." I stared at it, stunned. Then I smiled. "Josh," I said, voice soft. "This isn't a rebound. You're not my revenge story. You're my beginning." He kissed me on the forehead. "That's all I want to be." 3 months later, my parents hosted their 35th anniversary party in the same backyard where I once played tag with Monica under twinkle lights strung from old oak trees. There was wine, music, laughter. Monica and Henry were there, but distant, cordial, trying too hard. Josh held my hand through every awkward conversation, every forced smile. He even impressed my notoriously skeptical Aunt Sheila with stories about Japanese architecture and obscure jazz records. After cake, I stepped into the kitchen to grab water, and Monica followed. She didn't say much. Just, "You seem happy." I looked at her. "I am." She nodded, twisting her wedding ring absent-mindedly. "Marriage is harder than I thought." I hesitated. "It can be. It's work. Real love always is." There was a pause. Then she said quietly, "If I ever want to talk to someone, like a therapist, do you think your Dr. Bennett would take me?" I blinked. "I can ask her." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a first crack in the wall. We returned to the party separately. Later that night, as we drove home, Josh reached for my hand. "Penny for your thoughts?" I smiled at him. Just thinking, how sometimes the worst things lead to the best ones. He glanced over. "You still glad you went to the wedding?" I looked ahead at the city lights blurring through the windshield. "Yeah," I said. Because that was the day I stopped looking back. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who push you toward the version of yourself you were always meant to become. My sister didn't just steal my fiancé. She handed me back my freedom. And from there, I built a life far greater than anything I lost. If you've ever been betrayed, broken, or blindsided, remember this: your story isn't over. It might just be beginning.